Good evening, and welcome to the launch of A Blood Condition by Kayo Chingonyi. And welcome to Burley Fisher Books. I'm sitting in the closed bookshop. Wish I could have Kayo and Malaika with me to launch the book, but such are the times. Before I do my introduction, I just want to apologise if at any point I'm a little bit glitchy because often the internet being as it is, it's a little bit slow. So we'll try and make do. And just to explain how the event is going to go, I'm going to give a brief introduction, and then Kai is going to read, and then afterwards, Kai will be in conversation with Malaika, sorry, I keep mispronouncing your name, and then at the end we'll have questions. So please, as throughout the event, as things occur to you, just put your questions in the YouTube comments, and we'll just pick them all up at the end. But don't hesitate just to drop comments in there as we go along. A Blood Condition tells a story of inheritance, of people, places, cultures, and memories that form us. Kayo Chingonyi explores how distance and time, nations, and a century's history can collapse within a body. Our past continuous in our present. From London, Leeds, and the northeast to the banks of the Zambezi River, these poems consider change and permanence, grief and joy, the painful ongoing process of letting go with remarkable music and clarity. Kai is a fantastic poet, but don't just take my word for it. Joe Dunthorne has called his work intelligent and moving, the perfect balance between intricacy and directness. And I would also like to take this chance to thank Malika Booker for chairing the event this evening. Malika is a writer, poet, theatre maker, and multidisciplinary artist, and we're really grateful that she's taken the time to launch this with us and to Kayo. So I'm going to disappear now, and Kayo will be lighting up your screens, reading and performing. So round of applause, virtual round of applause for Kayo.
Thank you very much, Sam. If you can just let me know in the comments that I'm coming through loud and clear, that would be useful. I'm moving through a protracted setup here. Hello to Amy and to Leo as well. Thank you for being here and sharing this space with us. So I'm seeing a yes with many S's from Jasmine, so I think it's all good. Perfect. Thank you very much, everyone. So I'm going to read maybe 5 poems or so, and then Malaika and I are going to be in conversation. Then I'm going to invite questions from the audience. I'm coming through loud in London, which is like my spiritual state, I think. So I'm going to begin by reading a poem which arrived in 2017. So in 2017, my first collection, Kumukanda, came out. And I had that feeling which lots of people have when they've put together a first collection, which is sometimes 10 years in the making, has new work, old work in it. And I was like, okay, I've put out every single poem that I have. I've got nothing else. And I went on a writing retreat with my partner that summer, and both of us just wrote lots that summer, and it was wonderful. And it was just this return of poems to my life. So it was a wonderful thing. And this is one of the first ones that came. And I was thinking about the practice of elegy as a celebration of life. And this is the poem that came out. It's a poem called Blues for Albert Prodigy Johnson and Carl Hasty Samuel. Another scribe of black trauma has passed from this life into the spirit world or nothingness, depending on how much store you set by Nietzsche. Apt that the arch laureate of nihilism comes to mind when I think of Prodigy, old before his time, as I was old before mine. We passed a zoot rolled with torcador finesse round a circle in Barking before it had a health spa. One of our number was confined these times to his room by shame, a death of some kind because, lying under a sky pockmarked with stars, he asked his girlfriend why she was so quiet. When Hasty walked or fell in front of the lorry, did he pass away? If I can still hear him going back to back with K-Star and raps, if I think of him standing shoulder to shoulder with Prodigy, in a circle of dead MCs, screwing up his face singing, "Listen up, I'm so raw. You know I'm MC Hasty and I'm on tour. When I spit my lyrics, them a shout more. When I give you more, the people them will be so sore." In the year of our Lord 2003, Tox was still passing himself off as Little Dizzy, though Tox was by then closer in height to Jamackabee. After Lord of the Mics dropped, the gas was such, it just took a younger bussing a half-decent beatbox for the clash to start. Everyone played their part, from the hype men spitting lines back like a space echo, to those standing outside the cipher but close enough to cuss the vanquished, when a gap opened for him to walk in the unforgiving light of mediocrity. This was before anyone in our circle had been stabbed or shifted. Some had shouldered a wooden box, but none of us understood the cost of the shanks and skangs in our lyrics. If we knew those days as halcyon is hard to say. The mind is some next ends. We wouldn't have been caught dead slipping. Convinced as we were, the patch of grass beside the golden fish was big enough to constitute a world. I'm going to drink some water. Thank you, Yorkshire Water, for your blessings. I'm going to read a poem which is based in Yorkshire now. A hyper-local poem, to borrow a phrase from Joy White. This is called Postcard from the Shoalbrooks. And it's a poem I wrote for Tony Harrison, but also to a certain extent for Neil Roberts, who was my teacher at university and introduced me to the work of Tony Harrison. The Leeds poet, who's now also a Newcastle poet because he's lived there for so long. But I was thinking about his Leeds identity when I wrote this. Postcard from the Shoalbrooks. Ciroc bottles and nitrous canisters. Far cry from dance floors and nightclub banisters. The youngers sing blessings on blessings on blessings. Pouring a sip for departed brethrens, lost to the brief imposition of blades, or jailhouse, or another city's grey skyline. Better because of its distance. Hitting the books, or freestyling fictions to big up their chests, they ride for their ends on quad bikes and push bikes, this circle of friends. In this corner of your corner of the world, Tony, that scrap of contested land curled in your books. Facing the streets chiaroscuro, I look on, lost in this writing bureau. 50-year emblem from Sutcliffe and Son. Late thread in the fabric of Todmorden. I have to shout out my partner Sarah in reading this next one. I have to mention her by name as often as I can when I'm in these situations, because she's instrumental to my work coming out into the world. And in point of fact, if you look at the acknowledgements of this book, there she is in prominent position. So thank you, Sarah, for all of your support. And this is a poem you asked me to read. You got your head in your hands at this moment, but I'm very grateful for you. And I'm going to stop embarrassing you now. So this is a poem called Chingola Road Cemetery, which is a poem I wrote after visiting the graveyard where my dad is buried in Zambia. And if I say more, then I'll take away from the poem, so I'll just read it. Chingola Road Cemetery. Because of what it would take to visit, I visit Tata's grave on Street View in the early hours of mornings when the edge of sleep is like the border at Kasumbalesa, where men with red eyes police their sovereign patch, Kalashnikovs at their sides, gold standard of summary justice, making of a family cartographers, then sextons. Our Year 9 biology teacher glossed succession. The built environment will always be exposed as a fad, given time. And so it has come to pass here, the Chingonyi name's resting place. This is a picture of David, late, and Muzanga, equally late, and John Kanjamba, also late. Where we might find a stone, it's overgrown with long grasses and plants designated weeds because we've yet to lend them use. I came to pay my respects, as did my mother before me, kneeling at the exact spot all she carried like a bag of shopping dropped, its contents rolling. On the tape she made of his favourite songs, her voice cracks in the act of speaking, as if the act is what loosed him from this plane. Let us pause to play him Hotel California. Let us say father and son are driving together along a coastal road in an open-top feat of mid-century automotive nous. The son rides shotgun, skipping tunes to test the low end of the Alltech Lansing system in the back. As one track fades, another picks up the slack. A Wayfarer's tune, written in a shack on a 4-track in the 70s. A voice, threaded with regret. Each word a promise that in the end, the singer could not keep. So I want to read some short poems which are towards the end of the collection. At the beginning of 2020, I started writing a long elegy for my mother because it had been 20 years since she died. And A Blood Condition is a kind of book of grief and of letting grief go as well, to a certain extent. So I'll read a couple of these poems which are part of that sequence, which is a Pecha Kucha, a 20-part poem. So I want to read this one because I mentioned cassettes in the previous poem, and cassette tapes are a big part of my inheritance, my cultural life. I wouldn't be who I am without that format. And the inventor of the cassette tape died recently, and I want to thank him for coming up with it. Crazy portable thing. So this is called Inheritance and is part of a sequence called Genealogy, which is very close to the end of the book. Inheritance. Amid the clothes and shoes and electronics, this, your most apposite bequest, a box of cassettes, each one signed with your initials, that we might once again inhabit the same room. And I want to read this one for Zambia. When I last visited, I got picked up from the airport by my cousin, my granddad, although we would call it a great uncle in the UK, but we don't really do great uncle in Zambia. You just have loads of grandparents. My kaka, to give him his Luvali name, who's also my namesake. He's also called Kayombo. And my other cousin was there, and my nephews were there. And when they were driving me from the airport, I just felt this like breeze that I hadn't felt for a long time. This poem is an expression of that moment. To say something of equatorial sky, what the mind cannot remember, the body knows. So it is, I still feel the breeze, tickling the hairs on my arms. I'm going to read a few more poems in a second before I get into conversation with Malaika, but it would be remiss of me to continue without thanking a couple of people, a few people. Most especially, I want to thank Parissa Ibrahimi, who's my editor and who is the genius who makes my books resound and resonate in the ways that they do. So as much as I wrote the poems, my work in publication is a collaboration with her mind, and I'm so grateful for that gift of being able to hear her give her commentary and her incisive feedback on my work, but also those suggestions which take a batch of poems and make them into a book. So Parissa, thank you so much. I want to thank Charlotte Humphrey and Clara Farmer, and also Mia Quibble-Smith, who look after me exceptionally well. My love for the Chatto Windus family is very broad, and I thank all of you as well. I want also to thank everyone at Aitken Alexander who looks after me as well, particularly Chris and Monica. Yeah, you look after me exceptionally well also. So I'm going to read a couple more poems. I wanted to read this one because it's a kind of celebration of my friend's life. And what he brought into my life most especially. I should have looked at this. I should have put a little marker in here for it, but I didn't because I'm silly. But I wanted to bring an element of liveness to your dramatic experience this evening. This is a poem called Forgive. And I entitled the poem that because there's a kind of guilt which sets in when you hear someone has passed and you weren't in touch for a long time, but you were close in some way. So I hadn't been in touch with my friend for a while, and I heard that he'd passed on my way to a wedding, like I was literally getting ready to go. And I heard, and I described the moment in this poem, but I just thought about the last time we had spoken, and I mention it in this poem. This is Forgive. I'm going to read one more and then get into conversation with Malaika shortly, and then I'm going to hear from you as well. Forgive. Green-eyed boy, I write this from where you left off, the land of the living, so called. And how do you like your digs? Are you somewhere now bumping dark rhythms cut with a thread of light? What a time to be alive. Everyone's going on spare, not just my life going on pair. Have I told you about this recurring nightmare? A hammer coming down on a tree stump, my hand waiting on the stump for the blow. I learned of your passing as I dressed for a wedding. Shifting the knot of my tie, I said, okay. Marveling at the way a stock phrase insinuates itself, the way certain man spread to fill a space. We hadn't spoken in months. Had I known the words, bruv, what is good, would be the last words of our correspondence, I would have told you the tables and chair in your mother's kitchen rebuilt me. I would have asked if you remembered the day we heard crystal clear on rinse and glimpsed joy long enough to dance. before reading this poem, I want to thank you for being here with me and listening, all of you, and for your support, various and widespread that it is. Manifold. I'm very grateful for having so many of you in my life. This is called Guys and St. Thomas's and is, I think, the poem that's at the centre of the collection, for me at least. Thank you for listening. Guys and St. Thomas's. When I'm here in a particular character of mind, any woman of a certain height, hair plaited neat to meet the working day, becomes my mother in that year of early mornings she worked at GDRU, close to this stretch of the river, close to Hayes Galleria, the aquarium that is still here though she is not, to walk with me as we scrutinize tropical fish, laughing in the uncomplicated manner that comes of understanding, and after a bankside stroll, a cart proprietor advertises wares, varieties of ice cream. It's 1999, my last summer as native this side of the river, where the water brings pilgrims in search of a cure, for long hours, bad coffee, friends, always catching up and rarely giving conversation its due. How can I set down the passage of time? Who knew a face becomes less and less distinct the longer it no longer exists? How to lift this mist from my eyes that I might see this concrete and glass for what it is and stop writing my mother into it. That I might let her walk away, becoming smaller and smaller until she disappears. Once again, thank you so much for listening. I'm going to play a song before I get into conversation with Malaika. A song which is a celebration of my heritage a little bit. It's a song called Kambowa, which is by a group called Shalawambe. They're wonderful. If you can manage to get some of their work. Hard to come by, but have a listen. This is Kambowa. Pains me to cut them off there. It's a wonderful song. You should check it out. You can get it on an anthology called Zambiance from the Teal record label, just to be scrupulous about citation. And I'm really glad to be joined now by Malika Booker. Thank you so much, Malaika, my neighbor and spiritual guide.
Yeah, we're neighbors. Hi, Kayo Chingonyi. Well, God, congratulations on this exquisite collection. I just put down 20,000 questions, and we'll most probably get to 2. I thought we'd just have a conversation. And I'm honored that you asked me to talk to you about this book. A Blood Condition. For me, this is an exquisitely deceptive book of poetry. It's a poetry of memorial, it's elegiac, it's mythical. And Blood Condition seems concerned with inheritance and heirlooms in both the personal and the small sense, but in the broader sense as well, looking at personal history, but also the wider history of geographically, in terms of nationhood, nationally, in terms of family, in terms of space. But I feel like all the poems are poignant portraits of a snapshot. And I feel like the book held together by just starting it as in this myth. And I'm not going to say this wrong, so please correct me. But is it Nayayami? Can you tell me how you pronounce it?
It's mostly phonetic, Nyami Nyami. And in fact, probably I'm not saying that correctly. Chilu or Muguna in the comments, tell me how good my pronunciation was, because they're the Tonga branch of my family who are probably here. Let me know. I probably even myself get it wrong sometimes, but yeah, Nyami Nyami.
Well, this is what I wanted to start off with, Nyami Nyami. The book starts off with this establishment of this creation, of this myth, which feels like an adherent to a older folk tale and myth that's quite regional and quite cultural specific, but then opens up and allows you the space to kind of explore colonialism, the contemporary world, but as well as the blood condition, illness within it. It provides this framework, and you pull on it all the way through. What did the myth enable in you as the poet, and how did it enable you to kind of negotiate this difficult landscape and terrain?
I think what it was is that I hadn't been connected to the myths that come from Zambia too much. Obviously, I had them in my life in one way or another, but I feel like in writing poetry in English, I often draw for the myths that are close at hand in the West, I suppose. And connecting with my culture, for want of a better way of expressing it, that was really moving. Because I was like, okay, there's myths, strong, deep myths that I can draw on. And what it allowed me to do was think about the history of the place. Because I wanted to talk about a personal grief that's connected to a blood condition, to HIV as it functions, in terms of its personal resonance in my life. But also I wanted to talk about a national and generational grief as well. I wanted to talk about the world that was possible in Zambia, in the generations that preceded me, and the world that transpired in Zambia as well. So that poem of myth was a way of inhabiting that history that I didn't see. So yeah, that's kind of what it enabled, a way of inhabiting the history that had been mentioned to me in passing or in snatches of conversation with my elders. It was just my own way of trying to go back to the 50s, the 40s, all of these times I didn't see.
And then we move beautifully into this crown of sonnets entitled Origin Myth, where we're kind of looking at the origin of HIV in a way, but also the interaction and the myths and dispelling them and the taboos. For some reason, these sonnets kind of put me in mind of Kwame Dore's project Hope's Hospice, and him exploring HIV in Jamaica, and particularly his long sequence poems Faith and Quilt. And I was wondering if there was any kind of conversation happening between both of you. And also I was wondering about how you interact with in spaces and with those kind of with that kind of with HIV when it's taboo and also shameful, but also prevalent and a part of a fabric in the society in countries like ours.
I think there is a conversation between myself and the Jedi Master that is Kwame Dore's in that particular crown, and the very direct correlation between our work is that Kwame, I think you were in this workshop at Poetry School. Kwame did a Crown of Sonnets workshop, which I kind of like snuck my way into in a like sneaky way. But I have this purple notebook, which is the very, very, very first thread of what became this crown. So that's from years ago now. And in Kwame's workshop, he was making it sound so easy. So I was thinking to myself, let me try this crown of sonnets, and it's never worked before now. And it's been something that I've been challenging myself to try. And so it comes from a very direct challenge from Kwame to write in this long form way, in this formally constrained way, and to try and find a way within that form to express, to balance improvisation and fixity, I guess, for want of a better word. So yeah, I draw very much from Kwame's work and his acumen with form. It guided that poem. And I have to mention Danez Smith as well, whose crown from Don't Call Us Dead was really influential in relation to its very direct engagement with HIV. In terms of the stigma, I think the stigma of HIV is something I've carried, even though I didn't realize it. And it's nothing that I've been able to speak about before. And it's something even, I suppose, that not everybody in my life knew in relation to how it is my parents died. And talking about it openly has always felt really difficult. And I don't know whether it's because I've been through some therapy now or what, but I feel able to talk about it now. And I really want to battle the stigma, because wherever there's stigma, there's silence, and wherever there's silence is the possibility for harm. So I just wanted to open up lines of communication, channels through which we might speak and move away from shame, because my work, and I think the work of us all, is to move away from shame as much as possible. Because shame comes before many of the cruelties that human beings enact on each other, I feel. And so it's important to do away with it as much as we can. And that's where the kind of battling of stigma came from, I suppose, and the approach. And I didn't feel able to do it in my first book. I don't know why, but I felt able to do it now.
And that leads us, I mean, I suppose one of the things that I wanted to know is what the sonnet and what it enabled you to explore, because you then go on after that, a few poems almost discuss to actually interrogate yourself in terms of survivor's guilt. And I'm wondering what that landscape of the sonnet enabled you to do. So in terms of the subject matter in itself, what did 14 lines of repeatedly having to see something from a different perspective, what did that provide in this poem and in this subject matter that you're dealing with?
I think there's something about the sonnet which is supposed to connect with argument in some way. So I think what it provided is a space to like wrestle with the different feelings and sensations that arise from putting my body and mind into that space of thinking about HIV, its personal, national, international resonance. So something about the form let me know when the thing was finished, so that gave me a sense of safety and to talk about these things. Plus also there's a kind of like distance that you step into when you use form. It opens up a lot of stuff, but it also closes down other things. And for me, that balance helped keep me safe in writing this material, because I think coming from the school of poetry that kind of really influenced me, which is like the live environment of sharing your work, there's a lot of emotional rawness there, but there's not a lot of aftercare, for want of a better word. So the entertainment value comes from somebody opening themselves up, but when are we holding each other in that opening up? And there's something really special about form, is that it's an opening up and a holding at the same time. It's a kind of container for feeling. And for a person like me, you need some kind of container, some kind of jacket or outfit to put your feeling into. Otherwise it spills in all directions. And actually, to be honest, that's fine too. But, you know, it scares me, basically. So using the form was a way of being comfortably afraid.
Really interesting, because this book is such a profound departure from your first book, where you are so constrained, you are so controlled. You felt like in your first book, you felt like each word, you took one out, the whole poem would crumble. Whereas this even though you're in form here, it feels looser. And interesting enough, especially because you're in difficult terrain, it's really interesting to learn that actually you utilize the structure to support you, as opposed to being controlled within the structure as well. Which is going to lead me on to the next thing I wanted to talk to you about, which is, I feel like people like you, Roger Robinson, and Anthony Joseph are like poets and musicians, and I wonder, and music plays heavily in your art form. You also DJ, you also kind of make music, you also collaborate with dancers, and I wonder, one, do you write with music? Two, the impact of music on you, especially with a poem like 16 Bars for the Bit, particularly, like things like you can find angels behaving like demons in ends where the rents seem to change with the seasons. And I was reading that, I started reading that, I felt like I could rap. I felt like, yeah, a beat under me, I could take these lyrics. And so, do you write with music? Did you write this with music? And what's the relationship with you and music? Apart from making me like put on like a little beat and kind of take my hairbrush and think, yeah, man, I put some bars down. It's Kayo's bars.
Do you know what? That poem, 16 Bars for the Bits, is interesting because it's a rap verse which I've tried to bring into relationship with the sonnet, and I'm fully gonna experiment with that later in my career. But for now, I'm not doing no crowns of that particular kind of verse. But I, like I started writing as a lyricist in a kind of serious way. Rapskatai is in the comments, and we used to have a group called Phonetics, and we used to rap. Like, well, I mean, we still rap. Like, to this day, me and Raps, we've got bars. Trust me. So it's a through line in my life, and much to the annoyance of my partner and people around me, like I'm freestyling little bits and bobs, quoting other people's lyrics, basically every day, all day long. That's how my kind of imagination works. So different experiences, moments, etc., they connect to particular songs. And I don't write with music all the time, but I do write. I always write in the spirit of music. And there's a tune that I might play. I don't know if we'll get away with it necessarily because it's like a major label tune, but we'll see. It might get cut out of the recording of this thing, but in the live moment, they can't stop it. But yeah, I've been waiting for years for Jay Electronica's album, and then he releases it on a random one. And I don't even, when it first came out, I wasn't even caring too tough about it. But when I listened to it, I started walking around and listening to it. And there's the track that ends the album has really like, it's the presiding spirit of the book. It's about like, it's an elegy. It's about connecting with people that have passed. And yeah, that I was writing in the spirit of that tune, the way that tune makes me feel. When I put on my Bluetooth speaker and I have my shower and I listen to that tune, the way that made me feel is the spirit I was trying to get into when I was writing. So yeah, the music is, yeah, it haunts what I do, you know, it's a big part of my process.
And last question, before we open it up, is really coming back to that elegiac and that elegy and almost like the poems as altars and memorials to your father, your mother, but also Roddy Lumsden. And I know when I met you, well, not met you, I've known you for so long, but you were one of the poets who went to his workshops. And I wanted to ask you, it's such a beautiful, exquisitely elegiac memorial and poem, and the poem as altar, and the poem as testimony, and the poem as kind of celebratory, of celebrating someone. But I wanted to ask you about the impact of mentors and craftspeople on your life. I know that you were in the super group of complete works with, you know, with all the super group of poets who've gone on to do things in the world. So I wanted us to end, you know, because there might be people out there who want to know how you craft, why you craft. And I thought that it might be good to give you a chance to kind of talk about what mentoring and what we touched on about Darners and Kwame and other people influencing you, but to talk specifically about that and open it up for people.
I'm from like, I talk about this with Jay, I talk about it with Inawa, I talk about it with Warsan as well. And one of the things that's in my workspace is a picture of those three, like looking out of the window at Avon, like, I don't know, sharing a moment of poetic inspiration.
You guys were like, I remember Karen McCarthy Wolf and I were on that Avon course as kind of guest residents to enable to write, and you guys were all like Jedi in there. I was like, whoa.
The thing about that week, like a lot of people don't realize how much timeless work was created in that time. Like I don't even speak for myself. I wrote some good poems that time, but like genuinely, like stuff even that hasn't come out yet was made in that week. Like there was such a spirit of openness, connection. Everyone that was there was really... So there was a mentorship that arose from our relationship to each other, and our support for each other, which was like a peer mentorship. And then I'm from, you know, like a tradition in Black British poetry, whereby I receive mentorship informally without even realizing it, through the influence that one poet has had on someone else, and then someone gives me a little bit of wisdom that they've learned, that you've taken them aside and just mentioned to them, listen, this is something we were going through, this is what I'm going to tell you now. And then it comes to me, and then I pass it on to someone else. Same thing. And, you know, I've had so many, countless conversations like that. Advice on poetry and crucially on life as well. You know, how to balance this poetic intensity and sensibility with like living a, you know, a fully integrated life. That's the true mentorship, I feel like. And I've been particularly struck by the time that you, that Roger, that Nick, that Jacob, that Charlie, Bernadine, that you give. Like everything that me and my generation of writers are doing is because of your work. Lots of it invisible work. So thank you. So that's really all I want to say about mentorship, is that it's been crucial to what I do, and not all of it has been visible, but like I could not be here doing what I do without it. And yeah, that extends from figures like Roddy to you to all sorts of people who've just given me time. And yeah, it's been my honor and privilege to be given time, to be given that wonderful gift. So thank you. I feel like there might be some questions.
Yeah, I've retired now.
Thank you so much, Malaika. It was wonderful to be able to share this space with you, and thank you for being here.
Hello again, everyone. Thanks for that, guys. It's really brilliant. My first question, while we're collecting, can you play a bit of that song? Kayo?
Yeah. Let me try. I'm going to turn myself down and then. So I don't know how the tune is supposed to be named or what, but it's like APIDTA, which is probably like an acronym that I'm supposed to know, but I don't. I'm getting on in years now. I'm not up to the time. So yeah, this is from J Electronica. Yeah, I absolutely love that tune. It's it has almost, but not entirely, redeemed Jay-Z for me. But anyway, that's a different conversation for another time.
Put a playlist in the comments at the end, maybe for the people that are watching afterwards. And that way we can avoid getting taken down by YouTube or whatever. Yeah. So the first question is coming from Mega Magnum 360, an easy one just to start us off. What did you learn about yourself during the process of creating this book? This body of work. Great question.
I learned that I was afraid to be direct in my previous writing. And I learned that being direct in my writing comes at a cost, and so I need to put in place something to protect my well-being when I'm doing this kind of work. And I guess what I learned is to advocate for others to do the same if they're doing work which touches on trauma, gets them back into traumatic spaces. For the longest time, I had been trying to do the work without that in place. And as I said, it didn't work. I would get only so far and then I would become too afraid. So yeah, as much as the form is a safety, there's also a safety in actually talking about the stuff that comes up around the work, which isn't something I used to do. Like my family and friends, like here now watching this, are like, this level of openness from Kayo is wild. But yeah, that's where I've gotten to, and it wasn't possible before, but I did learn it during the process of this book. Like, it's possible to be even more open, as painful and difficult as that is for somebody like me.
Great answer. Yeah. And the next question from Sadie Parsons is, how do you go about putting an idea on paper? Do you start with form or a phrase or a word and build from that? Question mark.
I mentioned that things like rap lyrics and stuff are in my head all the time and are coming out in what I'm saying, annoyingly for other people, but poetry is like that too. So I might go to a reading and I can't describe it in any other way than like words start to kind of coalesce in my mind, and I can hear them, but it's not a hallucination as such. It's kind of like when I'm particularly moved by someone's work, echoes start to form in my mind, and so phrases come out of that. So after the event, I'll be like writing phrases, or phrases will be in my mind, and that happens in conversation too. So like, if we're ever talking and I'm like, part of me is like zoned out, that's probably what's happening. Like one part of my mind is just gone to that place. And yeah, lately I've been working a lot with that process and trying to be as instinctive as possible and trying to connect with that process a lot and trying to not mess with it too much. Malaika was mentioning that my first book felt really restrained, and in this book I'm doing things I wouldn't have dreamt of doing in the first book, but you know, it's still restrained in its own way. Maybe even more so in some ways, but there's something that's opened up as well.
Thank you. And yeah, we've got maybe one final question, and I wondered, Kayo, if you wanted to read us out after answering this with one final poem, or a couple if you prefer. And just, I want to take this opportunity to thank Malaika for being such a gracious and generous chair. Yeah, and having such great questions. I've felt held tonight. Yeah, and it's been a really amazing launch. And on that note, what did you leave out? Were there any strands in this that you excised to keep clarity, or that you might take up in later work? And that comes from Nation's Favourite Gravy.
No, that is a question. I left out a long poem in a kind of rap prosody, which I haven't published an entire book in rap prosody, but if you're a UK hip hop fan, you will notice that I drop in like little references to people like Jess, Chester P, Roots Maneuver. There's all kinds of stuff in there if like you have time on your hands to look for it. But I think I'm gonna play with that rap prosody a lot. And I keep saying to my publisher, my next book is a single poem, a long single poem set on one night in Romford. But no, obviously we'll see what happens. But yeah, I'm gonna play with rap prosody a lot more because I've separated the different writers that I am sometimes. Like, okay, this is me that writes essays. This is me that writes rap. This is me that writes folk songs. This is me that writes poems. And I want to bring all of those things into one space. And I've been really inspired by someone like Kai Miller, who's really wonderful at, like, he's a novelist, he's an essayist, he's a poet. And there's a flavor and a spirit of that in each of his works. I want to do that more. I really want to do that more. Before I read a poem, there's a question I think we missed, which is about, it came in just after we were like, there's no more questions. I will answer it though, because it's from an old friend. Yeah, I feel like the raw point of grief is really like being on autopilot, and there is a parallel, I think, to writing a certain experience. It's kind of writing itself at a certain point. And I did write poems out of that raw period of grief, and it felt like I didn't have to do as much in terms of editing and that kind of stuff because I was so close to it. But the further and further you get away from it, there's more that you have to do. And in particular, I think it was navigating the sense of guilt that sometimes can come up when you realize it's been a while since you've thought about the experiences you had with a person that you're grieving, or it's been a while since you could picture their face really clearly or their voice really clearly. I have that a lot, and writing it in poems, it comes out. So I think there is that parallel. And the rawness of grief creates a particular kind of work, and the distance creates another kind of work. And I think the balance between those two poles is what I'm striving for. Since we mentioned rap prosody, and I've been saying that I've got bars and this and that and whatever, let me read.
Just before you read, Kai,
for the bits.
Should we raise a glass to the book, and then I'll drop me and Malaika out, and then hand over to you. But that was condition.
Thank you, Sam and Burley Fisher and Malaika. Thank you so much for sharing this space as well.
Cheers, Kayo.
Cheers.
Thank you very much, everyone. Really lovely to share this space with you. And from seeing these comments scroll up, I actually feel like you're here with me, which is really cool. I was being all moody about being like online. Oh my god, it's not live, but it's wonderful to feel it all happening and to feel your presences, which bring a lot of joy to my life. So thank you. 16 bars for the bits. This is a new book, so I don't know where it is. It's page 15, if anyone's reading it along at home. Thank you so much for being here. 16 bars for the bits. The old men who meet at the same time each evening. The youngers get bladdered and stagger, the heaving, the chatter of pigeons emboldened while feeding, and towers that balance at heights beyond reason. A beacon for dreamers and schemers and heathens, you can find angels behaving like demons in ends, where the rents seem to change with the seasons and murder rates rise when the temperature's peaking. Friends change in tack, interrupted while speaking, students in packs, only back for the weekend, the steadfast who waited and think about leaving, the homeless in parks making bargains with breathing, the lights in the dark guide you home, and you're sleeping. Or tossing and turning, or scratching and wheezing, or thinking all night through the secrets you're keeping. And all this can come in the space of an evening. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here.